The Business of Biotech is produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for biopharma decision makers. If you're working on biologics process development and manufacturing challenges, you need to swing by bioprocessonline.com. If you're trying to stay ahead of the cell or gene therapy curve, visit cellandgene.com. When it's time to map out your clinical course, let clinicalleader.com help. And if optimizing outsourcing decisions is what you're after, check out outsourcepharma.com. We're Life Science Connect, and we're here to help. Today's radiopharmaceuticals aren't your daddy's chemotherapies. Multimodal approaches to the delivery of radiologically active compounds have created a fertile environment for players in the space to put on a precision medicine clinic, so to speak. What's more, radiopharmaceuticals create a unique business opportunity given the closely related and necessary companion diagnostics arena. I'm Matt Pillar, and on today's episode of the Business of Biotech, recorded in San Francisco, I'm sitting down with Dr. Jack Hoppin, CEO of Ratio Therapeutics, a company that's well-positioned in the space with a fresh Series B and the foundation of a tunable radiotherapeutic that Hoppin says addresses the delivery, safety, and efficacy challenges long associated with radiopharmaceuticals in the treatment of solid cancers. Let's give it a listen.
We came here to talk about Ratio Therapeutics.
We did, yeah. And Ratio Therapeutics is interesting to me personally, and to the podcast. I mean, we're 180 plus episodes deep into this thing, and I maybe have had one or two other radiopharmaceutical companies on, maybe, and it was like early days because I couldn't tell you who they are. So, yeah. So I'm not like intimately familiar with what's going on in that space right now. Sure. So give me a lay of the land before you get into like Ratio and why it's better than all the other radiopharmaceuticals.
We're cheering forever.
Yeah, well, that's good. I hear that a lot. Tell me a little bit about what the space is. Give me the landscape.
Sure. So the notion of injecting a radioactive drug for the purpose of killing cancer cytotoxic effect is not novel.
Right, and it's not novel or new.
No, like radioactive iodine-131, radioactive iodine was approved by the FDA in 1951. Mm-hmm. And it's still the standard of care for thyroid cancer and even hypothyroidism, just biological treatment. There was a couple good drugs that came out back at the turn of the century for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they were good drugs, but were not economically successful, somewhat controversially. And then Bayer came to market with Xofigo, which is radium chloride for metastatic bone cancer, very akin to the radioactive iodine, just injecting an isotope, and it just goes, in the case of iodine, to the thyroid, and in the case of radium chloride, it goes to osteoblasts, the interface of the tumor and bone and metastatic bone cancer. So it is efficacious to a point. It's also very good in a palliative care sense. And then what's happened, then the boom really has been over the last decade, more specifically the last 5 years, with Novartis making acquisitions and then getting approval for Lutathera for neuroendocrine disease. It's targets somatostatin, and Pluvicto was approved for castrate-resistant metastatic prostate cancer, and that targets PSMA, or prostate-specific membrane antigen. They're very good drugs with very little side effect, and that's why people have just gotten really excited. We've seen the big players come to the market over the last 5 years. There's been some recent and exciting acquisitions in the space. Mm-hmm. So I was really interested, as I mentioned in that previous life, working with so many radiolabeled drugs, of being in this space, but there really weren't the big players in the market, and that's what's needed, I think, for the supply side, for the distribution and the commercial side. We've watched a lot of players come in the last year. Eli Lilly made a big acquisition. Bristol Myers Squibb just announced a big acquisition to join the likes of already present Novartis, Bayer, and we see other big drug companies doing some trials and looking in the space. So that's a big change for the market.
Yeah, positive.
Really positive, because the drugs are good and they're a very, I think supply chain was an issue in the past. Manufacturing is always a topic. You're making something that's decaying. So it's another level of complexity as your shelf life is very short.
Yeah.
You're making each batch and releasing it.
Yeah.
And so, but those two drugs, Lutathera and Pluvicto, really have been a game changer. And now we see a huge pipeline of other companies and drugs in the space.
So now let's zoom out a little bit and give me some perspective on where radiopharmaceuticals kind of fit in the landscape of small molecules, traditional biologics, even cell and gene therapies.
Yeah, so for bloodborne cancers, those two drugs I mentioned, or lymphoma, for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, those were antibodies. But for solid tumors, while people have tried with antibodies, realistically, it's a small molecule sport. You need something with high capillary permeability, tissue diffusivity. You want to get something up and into the tumor quickly, and small molecules best lend themselves to that. And you are injecting a radioactive material, so you don't want long circulating radiation in the body.
Right.
So people have been really going after small molecules and peptides, another type of small molecule. And so we're a small molecule company with a platform that hitchhikes albumin. So we have very weak binding to albumin as compared to very preferentially very strong binding to the tumor antigen. You're looking for targets that are specific to solid tumors that are highly expressed in that environment and with very little off target. The efficacy is very predictable. It's really a function of how much radiation absorbed dose you can get to the tumor in a given dosing cycle as compared to what would be your off target dosimetry. So it's that ratio. The area under the curve, those relative regions of interest are where you really define your therapeutic efficacy, your therapeutic window. And so the great hope of this class of drug is very often as a replacement for chemotherapeutics. The side effects are much lower, little to no impact on the immune system, depending on the drug. So not borne out yet, but as we've really been focusing on single agent efficacy, but the great hope is that these in combination with other therapies will be disruptive because most people don't feel much or any effect of the drug. There can be if you don't have the ratio right. You don't have the ratio right. Well, radioactivity is not selective. We use two types of emitters, beta or alphas. Betas are electron and alphas are helium nuclei. One is literally 8,000 times bigger than the other. They have different properties and there's different isotopes that can be used. But then from that, you can calculate sort of what is the right isotope for that drug. We're really learning now what are the trade-offs of all of these.
Yeah.
People will be excited about this.
So Novartis is Novartis, emerging biotech, a small biotech is a small biotech.
That's correct.
You've got, that goes without saying. One of the differentiators being, you've got to raise money. Not that they don't, but the resources are a little thicker, right? So
Novartis has a different economic position than Ratio Therapeutics.
That's a very eloquent way to say what I was doing. Yeah. And it's, as we all know, super competitive and difficult. It's been difficult for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my next line of question. I'm curious about, what the investment appetite looks like. It's easy for a person in the position of industry observer to get spun up in, anything RNA or get spun up in anything ATMP, cell and gene therapies, or, get caught up in the excitement around ADCs, right? So I know what the investment appetite looks like there.
Yeah.
What does it look like for radiopharmaceuticals?
It has been really strong. It's been, the last 2 years of VC investing in the space have been somewhat frozen. Not radiopharma, just our space in general.
Yeah.
2023 being a down year with forecasted thawing. Lots of market economics have got us into that position. We've yet to have an institutional investor in the company. we did, the company was founded following a transaction with Biopharmaceuticals, and part of that was a strategic alliance to start work on one drug that they had acquired when they acquired Noria and Radiotherapeutic Therapeutics, which I should add was really the trigger of the founding of Ratio. John Babish, who was the founder of that company, had reached out to me to study kind of the pharmacokinetics of this platform, which I immediately fell in love with, a fit for purpose radiopharmaceutical. And so we really seeded the company through a couple of non-dilutive deals and then just some seed capital. We did a Series A last year, all large-scale family offices and insiders. And then we just closed a Series B, which we won't announce until next week. So I don't know when you're playing this podcast, but
it'll be after next week.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
And so at that time, you will have
heard the news.
It'll be known that we closed the Series B at the end of last year for $50 million, about half existing shareholders, half new. We did not have any classic VCs in that round either. We did have a strategic and another large-scale family office. So it's been going well. I think the appetite for radiopharmaceuticals is high in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So it's always hard to know we're a private company and pre-money valuations. I would say we're very rational and got a very fair. I think it was a fair deal for all parties. That's a fair wins the day. Always, I would always suggest that.
I mean, unfair is one of the things that got us in this mess a few years ago.
Unfair leads to, it always goes wrong. Not always, but it usually goes wrong. Right. And so we feel very good about our shareholder base. We felt very good about the raise. What's another unique aspect of radiopharmaceuticals is we inject incredibly small amounts of drug. So these are injections of 100 or so micrograms of drug. And radioactivity is only on about 1 in 1,000 of these molecules. So it's incredible thing how little radioactivity is required to be so cytotoxic. So there isn't an anxiety of the toxicity is the radioisotope. There isn't, you're at such a low mass of drug that you're not going to have drug effects.
Yeah.
And so, this is a long-winded way to say common in the space, and certainly in the origins of Lutathera and Pluvicto, is compassionate use casework in Germany, Austria. It's also done in some other countries where patients that have failed standard of care can be prescribed by locally produced and locally manufactured radioactive drug product, even if it's not approved yet.
Yeah.
It has to have some safety understanding to it.
Sure.
So we have, with our research collaborators in Germany and Austria, been able to do and investigate our drugs already in patients. And so that, I think, really is an accelerating decision, go, no go. It's a very unique aspect of this drug. You image, where the drug is, and then you can treat the patient. So it's a very quantitative sport, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that I think, even though the company's only not quite 3 years old, we came with a big IP position to start, and John Babish was at Cornell. His IP portfolio is fully in the company, other than what we had sold to Bayer. And so, in that sense, it's a different sport. It's not like we said we have a new platform, or we have an idea. We're going to raise a large Series A and just try to get going on it. We really showed up with, we have a fair bit of, we filed 2 INDs already. We put up a fair body of knowledge around that.
Yeah. That low ratio of radioactivity.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right? Does that play favorably to, one of the biggest problems in biologics right now from a patient access perspective is cost of development, cost of manufacturing. Is there an advantage there?
I would say, unfortunately, no. I do think that society has, well, yes and no. It depends. In the spectrum of things, I'd say the upside is we have synthetic organic chemistry, medicinal chemistry that can just make the precursor. But there is significant expense in the manufacturing of putting the radioactivity on the drug. Mm-hmm. So just that process is expensive. In the scheme of things, compared to many gene therapies, for example, it's still a lot cheaper than a lot of. Yeah. I mean, I think society's gotten pretty good at scaling up on. Right. So it's not prohibitive cost wise, but I can't say it's a cheap sport. And as you know, it's still any manufacturer right now, small molecule or other, still. But COGS for the cold drug are cheaper here, no question. Yeah. It's the radioactive part that's expensive.
Right. So. Okay. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, you were saying that you're based in Boston, and also last year, in addition to that Series A, opened an R&D facility.
We did.
So that was interesting to me. I'd like to hear about what goes on there at that R&D facility.
Yeah. So it's funny. Having witnessed both insourcing and outsourcing, with radioactivity, it's a lot easier to insource. You just making decisions. In general, it is. But
because no one in the outsourcing community wants to deal with radioactive material.
That was my background. The old company, Invitro, is like the primary outsourced service providers for these things, and they're a great company. But it's also speed. You still want to use them for certain things, but just quick speed is a big issue. And there's a lot of assays with radioactivity. Just having a lab that can handle radioactivity is inherently different than having all certain classic ADME, DMPK that might be easier to outsource. It's always a time and money conversation. And so we built a 19,000 square foot headquarter lab in the seaport of District of Boston. It's about 45% lab, 55% office. So true discovery facility, medicinal chemistry, radiochemistry, in vitro, ex vivo, and, pharmacology.
Yeah. What does that, give us to the best of your ability, an illustration of what that looks like and how those different disciplines kind of are situated even physically and encouraged to work together.
Yeah. When giving the lab tour, which I'll happily give you.
Yeah, it'll happen. I promise.
Yeah. You can think, we do, there's 4 medicinal chemists making compounds. We do use CMOs as well. So sometimes they'll be building part of the molecule, doing some of the syntheses, and that's a classic med chem lab. And then kind of order of operations, next would be the radiochemistry lab. They're unique in that you have probably 30 metric tons of lead in that lab. Mm-hmm. And we're in a really cool old building in the seaport called the Design Center, which was the largest building in the U.S. when the Pentagon was built in the 30s. So it was really for storage of arms. So it's kind of 18. It can handle that kind of weight on the 6th floor. Usually radiochemists are in the basement.
Yeah.
But that building specifically can handle that. And then we have a vivarium for mice and rats, and there's a lot of procedure rooms in there, as well as the most common assay here would be to do a biodistribution study and gamma count or just count the radioactivity per organ to understand the biod of the drug. Mm-hmm. And we have a biochemistry lab, cell culture lab, and a biochem lab where we can do in vitro and ex vivo work.
You have to take, you have to take special precautions in terms of if I walk around your lab with a Geiger meter, would I get real concerned?
Yeah, so there's
Geiger counter.
We would give you a dose meter, a visiting dose meter, just to come into the lab, and then there's Geiger counters on the way in and out to make sure you're not radioactive. Mm-hmm. These are very serious things, but openly, not like if you were at Los Alamos, there would be more stressful radioisotopes. These are all isotopes used in medicine, so they have rational half-lives of decay. but yes, there's a lot of precautions. Everyone has to be trained. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has to have a bond. There's a lot of licensing and safety that go into that. But it's and depending on the day, absolutely, the Geiger counter would light up. Now, hopefully, at the end of the day, it would not.
Right.
Happily, when everyone's going home from the lab, that there wouldn't just be radioactivity out. Yeah. It's part of the rules. Perhaps.
Yeah.
You do light tests, and just the nature of having.
I was just curious. We cover a lot of companies that obviously have biologic.
Yeah, exactly.
High potency biologics is sort of different animal.
Yeah, this would be nothing as stressful as a BSL-3 and certainly BSL-4. But there's you have to be careful. The biggest among them is the safety first, always safety for everyone who's working there, and also just safety. I think you just have to be really diligent to not get there's special ventilation. Radioactive iodine, for example, can be volatile, so you have stacks with monitors and so on. But you just can't let radioactivity out of the facility. Yeah.
What might the future hold in terms of building that space out as you get closer to, manufacturing, as you build, the need for manufacturing capacity? Is that in the plans, or?
Yeah, we've decided to go on the partner strategy for manufacturing. We have a really good partner, which will also be press releasing that alliance this quarter in North America, and another partner in Europe. Many companies in our space have decided to vertically integrate their manufacturing. We just saw how strong these CDMOs are in this space and felt we should partner in the make-buy partner conversation.
Yeah.
I think our core competency is really in discovery and translation, and I think our capital is better spent on that. And we'll file an IND this year for our first therapeutic. The first two INDs were for imaging. So this would be the first therapeutic IND.
Yeah. So this is an interesting, as you started to kind of go down that path, explaining why it's rational.
Yes.
Rational. But now I'm understanding it's more necessary than even rational.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. It's not impossible if, let's say, you were working on a target for which there was already an established diagnostic, like PSMA or somatostatin. Even FAP, which is our lead program, we did a deal for our FAP diagnostic with Lantheus, and we finished the phase 1 and they'll clinically develop it. But there's a couple other groups making FAP diagnostics. But if you're going after a target that for which there isn't one, you're going to have to. People are going to want to see the inclusion criteria that this person is. You're going to want to know that you have high enough concentration target to put that patient on a radiotherapy.
Yeah. Are there advantages beyond, the obvious advantage is if you identify a new target, you can create the diagnostic, you're well equipped to move quickly and be agile. Are there other advantages?
I think that it is one of the big advantages can be while you're working on the diagnostic, you're going to really understand if you have a therapy. So just that. And some people wouldn't even differentiate them. I want to understand what are the pharmacokinetics of my portfolio for this target.
Yeah.
And you need to understand if you have a drug. The correlation to antibody drug conjugates and having an LDT or something like this. The concentration seen in the PET scan is very predictive of the outcome of the therapy. So if you have a really high concentration in the PET scan, your likelihood of response is higher. It's specific to the drug and the target.
Right. Okay.
And when you do a PET scan, you inject and then scan someone. And here for the therapy, it's really about the residence time over. You want a half-life of residence of 100 hours. That's the kind of residence time you need. So they don't need to be the same molecule. Our diagnostic, for example, needs to be our therapy stays on target.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned that, there are compassionate use cases where locally sourced radiotherapeutics are being used, as I said, in compassionate use examples. But yet you say it's not insignificant to manufacture these therapeutics in terms of cost. So it's interesting to me. Like I'm struggling to
those sites have a radiopharmacy. They have radiochemists.
Okay.
They already have the infrastructure.
Gotcha.
So,
okay.
And that's really a one-off. It's really when you think about scaling something across a continent for supply of all patients. I think Novartis has done a great job of scaling up their manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
There have been growing pains because the demand is outpacing the supply, but they're addressing them. And so it just gets harder as you scale.
No, that's good. I'm glad I asked, and I'm glad you cleared that up for me, because when I hear, compassionate use locality, I think, that may lend itself to scalability and distribution of therapeutics globally. And in this case, that's not the case.
And they're a little different. Those are really they'll have release criteria and QC, but they're just scale. And so I think part of the excitement of the big players coming to the market is now real dollars and of really good companies are putting real effort into making sure that this is a scalable enterprise, and it's already being demonstrated. If that makes sense. So, there's many ways isotopes are produced, and both through public channels, like the DOE, but also through commercial enterprises. So, but historically, where there's a will, there's a way. If there's demand, society will make sense.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that your undergrad is in mathematics.
And I have my Ph.D.s in mathematics.
PhD, I'm sorry. Yes.
But so was my undergrad.
Yes. Yeah. And you gave me a little bit of backstory on what brought you to Ratio.
Yeah.
But the life sciences space in general, like what was the motivation to say? Was it just kind of fortuitous? Were you following the?
Yeah, I would say that I came from an imaging lab, and so I was working on imaging problems, and I did a postdoc at a German national lab where we developed this. The lab developed a technology, a nuclear imaging technology for rodent imaging. So image rodent at the same resolution as a human.
Was that experience like? I guess the question I'm wanting to get to is like, was that experience a revealing of a passion, or were you sort of the mathematician who would apply his mathematical skills to any problem presented to him? What was sort of because you stayed, right? You stuck around, and now you're now you're leading a biopharmaceutical company.
Yeah, the turn of events was after that, an American company licensed it. I moved to Hungary where we made the product, and I took right-hand turn and really worked on that product, and saw and really traveled, lived on an airplane effectively as we sold the product, and got intimate with a lot of universities and pharmaceutical companies using this technology in their research, and with a passion of doing quantitative analyses, writing software to, and then built a company based on that as a software and service. And I really gained respect for pharma companies and how solid they were at adopting technology and being very thorough. I just gained a lot of respect for pharma.
Really?
And I was really impressed with how.
When you say biotech, I'm listening to you and I'm going like, the pharmaceutical industry is, big bio is like notorious for being laggard in terms of tech adoption. But you're talking biotech. You're talking like there's the new age of biotech.
I would say no. I'm talking all pharma.
Yeah,
big biotech and pharma. So both big and small. The small typically couldn't afford this infrastructure, so they were outsourcing it, which is why we started a company.
Yeah.
But I was very impressed with how many of them would. I don't want to be critical of universities, but universities would have some universities are doing great, but others would have built out a facility and not necessarily be putting it through its paces. Where when pharma decided to go after and deploy a technology for use in their discovery programs, they were impressive.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. So what if you had to predict?
I think pharma are huge. If I could shift your paradigm.
Yeah.
They are.
Well, maybe. You can try.
In my experience, they are absolutely willing to make significant investments in new technology if it serves their purpose to make a go, no-go decision in their discovery business.
Yeah. And it's I make a sweeping generalization.
Yeah.
Like you look at the past 10 years where this wave has been building around AI and machine learning, and it's the age-old conversation about innovation, that kind of innovation, even scientific innovation coming from biotech and feeding up into big bio.
Yeah, I think that having built and run an informatics company in a previous life, but I would say that at Ratio, we are very dedicated to a data management platform where all data are coming in, they're being ingested. We put good effort into ingestion and evaluation. Throwing AI is another tool, and obviously with ChatGPT, we have now a language model tool, right? Mm-hmm. But you have to have structured data to glean insights. We certainly have made it easier as a society to use those tools, but the effort is, if you look at data science, it's 90% management, 10% analysis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the super heavy AI centric companies I talk to, when you compare and contrast what they're doing to the company that's just sort of like playing the AI, nomenclature game because it's sexy right now. Yeah. Those fundamentals are key among the understanders, right?
Yeah. This space does lend it. Imaging, radiology, in general, it lends itself very well to machine learning. So radiology has had the most AI FDA approvals in terms of readouts. Nuclear medicine less so, but we did in our lifetime, we experienced a lot of machine learning on these types of data.
Yeah.
And we're seeing obviously a movement in digital pathology as well, but it's a harder problem.
Yeah.
But it's
right.
Yeah. So I could talk about that all day.
Another episode.
Yeah.
What's next for Ratio? What's the next big step on the continuum of?
Filing this IND, continue. Now that we've seen success with this platform, making fit for purpose molecules, having this tunable nature of being able to immediately kind of look at what is the right form. It's been impressive how quantitatively tunable the platform is by modifying the album binder. And so turning our focus on to a couple of the targets where we think we can make an improvement on existing modalities. I don't know that, we to date have not gone after completely novel targets. We've worked on targets that are well characterized. It's a lot faster. There's preclinical information. When things are well characterized, then we can turn our attention.
So that's been a strategic decision today.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I don't see that changing. So, it should be we're pretty excited. We're very optimistic around the lead program because we've already treated patients.
Yeah.
So that's an advantage.
When you come to a place like San Francisco for a big investor conference, what are you looking to get out? Like what's sort of the MO?
Right after this, I will go to a meeting with potential collaborators in the pharma space. We know our role in the industry, and it's very often to be good to have. So I'm looking at potential licensing discussions, meeting with more B2B. We just closed our Series B, so I am meeting with some financiers, but more ongoing relations, not
business development.
Yeah, I'm not
You don't have your pitch deck in your pocket, hoping to bump into.
I don't. I did enough pitching last year to last me a while. Yeah. No, that would not this year. That wouldn't be the focus. Relationships and just good conversations around what's happening in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And we already have some strategic partnerships with big pharma, so meeting with those people.
Yeah, good deal. Well, hopefully this conversation served as a warm up for your next one.
Yeah, exactly.
What haven't I asked you that I should have asked you about you and Ratio?
Yeah.
What part of the story am I missing? It's your last chance to, do something other than give me your pitch deck.
Yeah, I think that you asked. I have helped start and build a couple organizations, and you asked what would you say to an entrepreneur?
That's it.
I just think, I think that I won't say, some people say, what would you do differently? And very often it's just, I wouldn't have done it. But not quite that. I would just say, making sure you're getting people advising you who have done it and are wildly critical of what you're doing. There's just no value in people telling you that you're doing it.
Well, since you brought it up, I'll ask you a follow-up question to that. Where do you find that group of people, or even if it's smaller? What sort of forum do you find yourself in where you're exposing yourself to that sort of criticism by the folks who have scraped their knees?
I think that could be a benefit of raising capital, or just a history of doing business. It's not a single answer, right? I would say the people whose advice I seek have pretty varied backgrounds and varied experiences, but they all have good experience.
Are you saying not necessarily just in biotech?
In life, but I think that, I think of a few people that are either on the board or frankly observing or coming or have invested in, whose opinion I respect, and trying to triangulate from them what their thoughts are.
Yeah.
And always, I'm a big believer in always finding someone who I assume it's not that hard to be dumber than most things. So just finding someone who
Ph.D. in mathematics.
So it's not finding someone who can give, who's been there, can give you. You don't have to do everything they say, but you really need people. The biggest mistake I see comes is people convince themselves of something, and that may or may not be true. And they need feedback. They need pushback.
One last question on that. What's a safe forum for that kind of, is a one-to-one?
I prefer one-to-one. Yeah. And usually before a board meeting. I think a board meeting should really be alignment, execution. I think we'd all like to think about strategy in a board meeting, and it's good to discuss them, but I don't think there should be surprises in board meetings. I think those conversations should take place prior. You should, consensus building is the job of the CEO. The consensus can't be built just in a board. It has to be built prior.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a serial entrepreneur at this point, or do you need a couple more notches?
I don't. I've only done things because I thought they had a good mission, a good purpose. Most things come from there. I think people might call me that, but I don't know that. I think as long as you have a good mission, a good purpose, and you believe you have a rational technology to address the mission and purpose, the mission.
Apply it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ideas are cheap. They're very cheap. Execution is very hard.
Yeah. Well, very good. I know I'm abusing your time. You've got another appointment to get to, but this has been enjoyable. Dr. Jack Hoppin, Ratio Therapeutics. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
Going to take you up on a tour of the lab,
please,
in Boston.
We're going to get you gowned up. We're not going to put any radioactivity on you.
That's great.
But we're going to confirm that as we walk out of the
I'd
lab.
like to hear it because my wife would like to hear that as well. It'll probably be in the spring when the weather breaks.
I'd at least wait till March.
For sure. That's what's going to happen.
All right. Well, great meeting you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks for all you do.
I'm Matt Pillar, and you just listened to the Business of Biotech, the weekly podcast dedicated to the builders of biotech.
We drop a new episode with a new exec every Monday morning, and I'd like you to join our community of subscribers at bioprocessonline.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe to our never spammy, always insightful monthly newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. If you have feedback or topic and guest suggestions, hit me up on LinkedIn and let's chat. And as always, thanks for listening.